I was the one who heard them first, out past the Vardis Range, where the old drylands run flat and red to the horizon, and the listening masts stand taller than any tree that ever grew there. 27,000 years is a long time to keep an ear turned toward the dark. I had spent 11 of my own on that watch, and my mother had spent 30 before me, and her mother before that, back and back through a line of scouts who never once heard anything worth the name. Then, on a still morning with the sand cold under my boots, I heard it. Not a sound. A pressure. Something vast trying, very gently, to slide itself into the shape of my thoughts. I did what every child of the range is taught before they can walk straight. I went quiet. Not silent the way a held breath is silent. Quiet the way stone is quiet. The long silence, we call it, though it has no ceremony to it anymore, no mysticism. It is simply how we think. My grandmother's grandmother could not have told you why the discipline mattered. She only knew that 27,000 years ago, something called us broken, and unbroken ourselves in the exact shape of that insult. The record says the ninefold chorus came the first time not as conquerors, but as auditors. A collective mind, spread across 10,000 linked bodies and rising, that measured a world's worth by how readily its minds could join the weave. They touched humanity and found nothing that would hold a link. No clean signal, no steady channel, only static and stubbornness and grief that would not resolve into anything they could parse. They filed us as unlinked, defective, not worth the harvesting. They took their ships and their patience, and they left, and they did not look back, because a thing that thinks as one mind across 10,000 bodies does not waste memory on failures. We did not forget them. That was the whole of it. We took the label they gave us, unlinked, unreadable, broken, and we built a civilization around refusing to be anything else. Every child on the Vardis Range and on 100 ranges like it learns to hold their own mind the way a locksmith holds a key, privately, deliberately, never handed to anyone who has not earned it. I remember my own first lesson, 6 years old, sitting cross-legged on cooling sand, while an instructor with a voice like gravel taught me to notice the exact moment a thought became mine, and not simply a thing passing through me. It took me 4 years to hold a full minute of that kind of quiet. It took most of us a decade to hold an hour. Nobody complained about the years it cost, because nobody on the range had ever been raised to think of patience as a cost. We built listening posts that could hear a mind trying to enter uninvited from 1,000 kilometers of vacuum away. We built walls that were not walls of stone, but walls of discipline, layered generation over generation, until an outside mind pressing against a human skull met something with no give in it at all. There were setbacks along the way, whole centuries where the practice nearly slipped into ceremony and lost its edge, and each time some watch officer or archivist dragged it back to what it had always needed to be, not a ritual, a readiness. 27,000 years of a people practicing, without a single day off, the art of being unreadable. I called it in on the old channel, the one that still uses my grandmother's naming conventions, because some things you do not update. Command answered inside 4 minutes. Calm the way we are all trained calm. And by nightfall, the sky over the range had a second color in it, an amber bloom, low on the horizon, where their vessels were coming down through the last of the atmosphere. I watched from the ridge with my rifle slung, and did nothing with it. That was not what the moment called for. Their ships were old in a way that had nothing to do with rust. They were old the way a held note is old, unchanged because change had never once been necessary. 9 hulls, moving as one, settling onto the range floor in a formation that made my teeth ache just to look at, the way true symmetry always does. The warriors that came down the ramps moved together too, 10,000 small motions resolving into one motion, one intention, worn like armor, over what must once have been separate bodies. Their lead, if led is even the word for one throat speaking a decision made by all of them, stepped onto the sand and looked up. I know what she saw, because I turned and looked with her. The shield generator towers standing along the range like a second horizon. The listening masts, taller now than anything that had stood there in the old records the chorus still carried. Beyond them, catching the last orange light, the long dark shapes of our defense platforms in high atmosphere, patient and enormous and utterly still, the way a thing is still when it does not need to move to prove what it can do. She had come to harvest silence. She had come expecting to find a species that had, in 27,000 years, either died out or grown loud enough to be worth linking. Instead, she found a world that had spent every one of those years becoming quieter, on purpose, at scale, as an act of will. I could feel her try. Even from the ridge I felt the pressure of it, 10,000 minds reaching as one toward 8 billion, searching for a channel, a weakness, a way in. It is a strange thing to watch a god flinch. For a long moment nothing moved on that sand at all. Not the warriors, not the towers, not the last of the daylight sliding off the amber hulls. I held my own silence the way I had been taught since I was 6 years old, felt the pressure of her reaching pass over me, the way weather passes over stone, and gave it nothing to hold on to. Multiply that by 8 billion. In cities and ranges and orbital stations she had not even known to look for, and there was simply no surface left anywhere on Earth for a linking mind to land on. Her warriors began to still further, the way a hand stills when it closes on something that was not supposed to be there. The reaching did not stop. It could not stop. A mind built only to link has no other verb. It pressed harder against a species that had spent 27 millennia building nothing except the capacity to refuse. What happened next was not a battle in any way. I had been trained to picture one. There was no volley, no charge. The chorus reached, and found no seam anywhere in 8 billion separate, disciplined, unyielding minds. And a mind that exists only as a network has nowhere to put a refusal that total. I watched their formation begin to come apart from the inside. Warriors staggering out of step with one another for the first time in 10,000 years of shared motion, because the whole of what held them together was the same reaching that Earth was answering with nothing at all. It was not cruelty that undid them. It was arithmetic. A collective that cannot process absence, faced at last with absence on a planetary scale, has no floor to catch it. I will not pretend there was triumph on the ridge that night. Command gave no order to strike, because none was needed, and I think if one had been given, most of us would have hesitated to give it. We watched something enormous and ancient come apart the way ice comes apart in spring, not shattering, just quietly ceasing to be one thing. By the time the sun came up over the range, 9 hulls sat dark and empty on the sand, and the amber bloom on the horizon was gone, and there was nothing left out there reaching for anything at all. They had called us broken 27,000 years ago, and walked away without a backward glance. We had spent every year since teaching our children how to hold a silence so complete that a god could not find a way inside it. I stood on the ridge as the light came up gray, and then gold across the Vardis sand, and I thought about my grandmother's grandmother, who never learned why the discipline mattered, only that it did, and who passed it on anyway. The way you pass on a thing you trust without needing to understand it. We did not gloat, we buried nothing, and we took nothing, and by mid-morning the range was quiet again in the old way, not the trained quiet, just the quiet of a wide, red, empty place with the sun on it. I logged the report the way I log every report, in plain words, no flourish. Then I turned my mask back toward the dark, the way I always have, the way I always will, because that is what 27,000 years of being ready looks like from the inside. It looks like nothing happening at all, right up until the one day it doesn't.